Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the biggest questions I have for the power conferences. A lot of different stuff going on, obviously with the SEC. Will one of those young quarterbacks step up? Will Arch Manning, Gunnar Stockton, maybe Austin Simmons even, over there in Oxford step up in a big way? And that might just define that conference. But we got some big stuff to get into, and we gotta talk about recruiting. It's been going absolutely crazy, as it does right around this time of year, just about every single year. But we got some big time stories to talk about, and I think, weirdly enough, we got to start in Lubbock, Texas. I think this might be the first time that a lot of people have started their recruiting talk in Lubbock, Texas, but the Felix Ojo saga has been something to watch over the last little bit. Felix Ojo, the number one offensive tackle in the country, at least according to 24/7. He has committed to Texas Tech. It looks like the rev sharing deal is going to be 3 years, $5.1 million, fully guaranteed. So kind of the first time we've seen this. Now, there's been other deals that have been kind of a little bit less publicized than this that we'll talk about actually a little bit later in this segment, but at the end of the day, this is a huge deal. There's no two ways about it, and it's a huge deal for a number of reasons, and one of them we can get into maybe on Friday in a little bit more depth because we talked about it when we were talking about the house settlement. How enforceable are these rules? Is Texas Tech thinking that these rules are enforceable? I think has a lot to do with this conversation because they have a lot of money tied up, whether it's with Felix Ojo or some of the guys they just brought in from the portal. They have a lot of that, hypothetically, $15 million that they would have to dole out to their football team already kind of locked up for the next couple of seasons. Are they thinking that they only have $15 million, or are they thinking that these rules don't mean too much and we can probably spend whatever money we want? That'll kind of come out in the next 6 months. But at the end of the day, regardless of that, because at the end of the day, that is kind of nebulous to me. That doesn't much matter, if I'm being totally honest, because the reality is there's a lot of teams on both sides of that fence. There's some teams that are fully playing by the rules because they think they will hold up. There's some teams that are tiptoeing around it just a little bit because they don't think the rules will hold up, or at the very least, they won't kick in until a little bit later down the road as they kind of iron out the details at the very least. I tend to think Texas Tech is just trying to make as much stuff happen before everything is set in stone. But at the end of the day, you got a really good player. And you got a player that everyone knows the price tag of. They know it's $5.1 million over the next 3 years. The guy better be ready to roll. I can tell you that much. And there's been a lot of talk of they're just buying this kid. And frankly, they weren't the finalists in the final couple of days. This was kind of talked about among Texas insiders, among Ohio State insiders that were kind of leading this recruitment. They kind of knew this was going to happen. But going into it, he wasn't. Texas Tech was not on the finalist list. I believe it was Florida, Ohio State, Texas, and Tennessee. I could be wrong about that. But regardless, Texas and Ohio State, most likely Texas, was going to win this recruitment. And then Texas Tech comes in with a huge offer. Obviously not something that we love to see, but let's be totally honest. If you paid me $5.1 million to go play for Joey McGuire, I'm sprinting to Lubbock. I love Joey McGuire. There is no question that he is very, very good at putting together those relationships. So while this was a big-time price tag, and I don't think he ends up at Texas Tech without the big price tag, I think they have a plenty good relationship. I don't think you should take away from this that he was totally bought. I do think that changed the game. I can tell you that much pretty confidently. But at the end of the day, everyone knows what the price tag is. He better come ready. He's a very, very toolsy guy. 6'7", only about 270-ish right now, so has to put on about 35, 40 pounds if he really wants to play right away at a high level. But he better be ready to play at a high level. I can promise you that, because now it's no longer, you hear whispers of what the price tag is. Everyone knows what the price tag is. You're making $1.7 million the second you step on campus. You better be playing really good football the second you step on campus. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. Huge kudos to Texas Tech for getting this done. You can be mad about the way they got it done, but at the end of the day, they got a really good player. And if they're able to make this happen and make the money work, then more power to them, because about 11% of their revenue share is going to be tied up with this dude going over the next couple of years. That could get sketchy, depending on how they see the next couple of years going. But at the end of the day, that's something we can get into in a little bit more brass tack later on. But a lot of teams are playing fast and loose with how the house settlement works right about now. But let's get into the ridiculous run that Georgia was on in June and might just continue to be on, frankly. In the last 42, 41 days, something like that, they've added 20 commits. And they had 19 guys that have added to their 2026 class, did add one guy to their 2027 very talented corner that we can talk about a little bit down the road. But Jared Curtis obviously leads this class, the only 5-star in this class right now. I tend to believe a lot of these guys will be or could be 5-stars, so not super worried about it. James Johnson, an incredible player from down in Miami. Justin Fitzpatrick, very talented corner. Braden Fogel, really good tight end. A guy that is going to be very talented, kind of on the outside, a little bit more of a Brock Bowers, not necessarily an inline guy, but very, very toolsy, very talented, very fast for a tight end. He is going to be a big-time player for them down the road, as a lot of tight ends are. And then Chase Calicut, a guy I really, really like that Texas very much wanted. I can promise you that. And Georgia, I think, feels pretty good taking that guy away from Texas, but very talented corner that absolutely will be a piece for Georgia going forward. And I think Georgia's done a really good job kind of adapting to the new circumstances, because I don't think they ever really changed during the NIL era. Now, they offered money. I'm not here to tell you that Georgia never offered money or never got into any bidding wars. I'm telling you they had a lower ceiling than a lot of teams. They were not going to get into the crazy bidding wars that went over $1.5 million or anything crazy. They were able to kind of just go about their business, and they still recruited at a high level. Now they're just back to playing the same game as everyone else and being at a very, very high level. So I think they're going to end with a top 5 class at the very least. I believe they're number 2 right now over a 247, so they're going to recruit at a high level no matter what the circumstances are. But feels like the sport's coming back to Georgia just a little bit, coming back to Kirby Smart, and I think they're fully ready to get this thing going. I think they might just have a full class right about now. They'll probably add a couple more guys here and there. Caden Prothro is someone to watch. Obviously, another tight end that they might just add that could play wide receiver at the next level, but regardless, they could add a couple more guys. They pretty much got their class put together. They got 27 guys right now. If they add a couple more guys, get up to around 30, I think they'll be more than fine, and hopefully just hold on to those guys and sign them at the end of the run. But remarkable June for Kirby Smart in Georgia, and they might just add a couple more guys in July. And then Notre Dame. The approach is very, very obvious. It seems from Notre Dame on the recruiting trail, just find the NFL legends, go call their kids, because they have Devin Fitzgerald, Larry Fitzgerald's son. They have Caden Finley, Jermichael Finley's son. They have Thomas Davis Jr., Thomas Davis's son, all in this 26 class alone. In the last couple of classes, they've gotten Plaxico Burress's kid. They've gotten Jerome Bettis's kid. C.J. Carr's, Lloyd Carr's grandson. It is a ridiculous thing that Marcus Freeman is doing, where he's just getting guys with the right genes, and frankly, I do not blame him one bit. These are very, very talented guys. Really love what Caden Finley can end up being. Very talented guy, a guy that has remarkable head on his shoulders that I think has been really, really evident over his recruitment. And you just got dudes. You know you have dudes because you've seen what their dads can do. You know what they have in them, and you just got to get it out of them. I think all of these guys are plenty talented right now. I think they understand that they can hit that next level at Notre Dame, and they're number 4th overall in the recruiting rankings right now. Don't necessarily have that quarterback to go in this class, but frankly, I don't think they're worried about 2026. I think they love C.J. Carr, and I think they feel very confident about him going into 2026, and then they'll figure out the quarterback situation from there. They did have Deuce Knight for a minute. That went sideways pretty quickly. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame just continues to fire on all cylinders. It's been remarkable what they've been able to do after losing Brian Kelly, and we'll talk about losing their GM to the team we'll talk about here in a second, but remarkable stuff from Marcus Freeman. He's such a talented guy that you can't deny at this point. He is going to be a very, very long stalwart in this sport, probably at Notre Dame, probably winning national titles here pretty soon, and it might just be with a couple NFL legends on the sideline. And then we got to talk about USC, the team that actually took the GM from Notre Dame, Chad Bowden, one of the most special guys in this sport that you do not know the name of probably. He is a guy that behind the scenes everyone talks about, and behind the scenes they were saying Notre Dame just lost a guy that could tank their class. Obviously it didn't. They're doing more than fine with the class they have right now, but Chad Bowden found his way down to Southern California, and Mark Bowman came right after him. A remarkable talent that has an insane NIL deal just like Felix Ojo. maybe even more insane. It sounds like it might be $8 million over the next 3 years for that tight end. Now, he might be a Brock Bowers level talent, so keep that in mind. He might be an absolute freak that can make all the difference in that offense. Doesn't change that there's a lot of money to go around, and it'll be really interesting to watch that kind of develop over the next little bit, because USC might be playing outside the rules as well. But at the end of the day, we'll see how that develops. That's something we can talk about in more detail, but a pretty crazy deal for a tight end, I can promise you that. And on the D-line and O-line, they're recruiting at a very high level. Kene Pepe might be the very best offensive lineman in the entire country. Jamian Winfield on the defensive line is downright elite. They're putting it together. They're doing exactly what they need to do. Now, will they put it all together in the speed that they need to is kind of the big question, because the clock is ticking just a little bit for Lincoln Riley. Now, I don't think this year he's in danger or anything like that. I think next year he could be pretty quickly. I'll just leave it at that for now, but I love what this program's doing. I love the changes they made at the coordinator position. I love the changes they made in the recruiting perspective. Just love the way that Lincoln Riley's talking as he gets into the season. We'll see if it makes a big time difference. Maybe it won't. Maybe they're the team to watch as a kind of dark horse to make the CFP. So we'll figure all that out in time. But on the recruiting trail, USC is doing exactly what they need to do to be USC again, at least the USC that we're all comfortable with. Alabama just stockpiling 5 stars. It is absolutely ridiculous what Kalen DeBoer is doing down there in Tuscaloosa, and a lot of people are really angry about this one. They're saying Nick Saban's coming back and doing all the recruiting for them. I'll put this very, very plainly. If Kalen DeBoer did not use Nick Saban in recruiting, he should be fired. I mean that very, very plainly. If he does not use the greatest coach of all time, the guy that when he walks into the room, every single person knows exactly who he is. They turn to his direction. They stop talking. They let him talk. If he does not use that person in recruiting, he's the dumbest person alive. He should not be coaching at Alabama. He shouldn't even be coaching college football. And I know Kalen DeBoer is not that dumb. He was obviously going to use Nick Saban in recruiting. The other part, if you think Nick Saban is why these guys are committing to Alabama, you are out of your mind. Kalen DeBoer has done an incredible job building out that staff. You obviously have Ryan Grubb coming back into the mix. You add guys like Xavier Griffin at linebacker, an absolute freak that has tons of Alabama ties. Sadarian Morgan from Alabama. They weren't letting them leave the state. They definitely should not have let him leave the state, and they were able to hold on to him. An incredible wide receiver. Jordan Edmonds at corner. You have Jarius Edwards at safety that is an absolute terrifying individual. A huge, huge guy that will come down and lay an absolute lick on you. Incredible player. And then you have Xavier Crowell, Nolan Wilson. A lot of really, really talented guys, and a lot of people that said Kalen DeBoer would not be able to recruit in the Southeast. They're deleting some tweets. Let's just put it that way. At the end of the day, they can put it off as Nick Saban's recruiting. They can put it off as, well, it's Alabama. Of course anyone can recruit there. He's getting the job done at a very, very high level. I believe they have 5 stars some places. They have 4 in some other places. So if you're an Alabama fan, maybe lean towards On 3. I believe you got 5 stars there. If you're an Auburn fan, maybe lean towards 247 because they only have 4 there. And regardless, if you're an Auburn fan, you're not going to like what you see on those sites because it's a little bit nasty down there in Auburn, Alabama. And that's something we can get into in a little bit of time. But some other little things I wanted to hit here. Maybe we'll start talking about Auburn here in a second, but did want to talk about this here very, very quickly. Very, very huge commitment for Syracuse. 5-star wide receiver, incredibly talented guy that probably wouldn't go into Syracuse if Fran Brown wasn't there. That is what Fran Brown brings to this program, a remarkable player that absolutely will have an impact for this team, will absolutely make some big-time plays here pretty soon. I can almost promise you that. Very talented kid and cannot wait to see what Syracuse can do. This is the biggest recruit they've gotten in a very long time, and it looks like he's going to be huge for them very, very quickly. A lot will take shape over the next 46 days. Auburn's got a lot to figure out. I can promise you that. Hugh Freeze is getting pieces wrote about him in Golf Digest, which is never a good sign about how things are going around your program. Overall, we'll watch this very closely over the next little bit. We'll do some segments here and there talking about recruiting because a lot of commitments coming down the pipe. I can promise you that. A lot of different guys that will be committing, a lot of different classes that will be taking pretty good shape. I think we all understand at this point, around the end of August is when you have pretty set classes. Now, obviously, there will be some guys that will commit late. There will be some guys that will flip late and all that great stuff. But at the end of the day, around this time is when you really start to solidify your class. I think Texas has a little bit of work to do on the trail. Ohio State fans are upset about the amount of money they're able to spend right about now, and we can get into that in time. Auburn, we've talked about a little bit. There's a lot of different things that have to happen, and if they don't, then some of these teams could be in a bad place going forward. But at the end of the day, we're 46 days out from football happening. We're 46 days out from the best time of the year, and we are going to start heating up the content even more. I will be back here on Friday. We're going to talk about breakout candidates. We're going to get into some media day stuff. We'll talk about a lot of different things on Friday. Haven't fully set that in stone yet, but at the end of the day, we'll get into all of that craziness. There's media days going on right now for the Big 12. We'll get into all of it on Friday, I can promise you that. But thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, do all of that great stuff. Comment any questions you have. I can put them into Friday's show. But overall, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys on Friday.